Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. This is Marvin Lindsay with a little bit off of the sermon cutting room floor. We're going to start by showing you my manger scene. There's old Joseph. Here's Mary in red, not blue for some reason. But the baby Jesus here is in blue. I'm going to keep these out until January 6th, which is Epiphany. Today's Tuesday, so I guess that's Friday. But I want to talk today about Mary and Joseph and Jesus's accommodations. Where did they stay on Christmas Day? Or more to the point, where did they not stay? You know, I think everybody has that story of Christmas basically memorized from the Charlie Brown episode. They She gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. So it seems as though they were in Bethlehem for Joseph to pay his taxes, but all the accommodations were full. And so, in desperation, they lodged or were lodged in a stable, in a barn, and that's where Mary gave birth to Jesus. But this month, as I was working on the Christmas story, I was reading the New Revised Standard Version's updated edition. I normally use the New Revised Standard Version for sermon preparation, and recently they have updated that translation, which was originally published, I think, in 1989. And in that translation, it says there was no room for them in the guest room, not the inn, no room for them in the guest room. And I was like, wow, that's different. You know, it's kind of a different translation. So I started looking around, and yeah, there's been some scholarly articles that have been written over the last decade or two that question that translation of the word is in and really call into question where Mary and Joseph actually stayed when they were in Bethlehem and Jesus was born. There's a Duke University professor, his name is Stephen Carlson, and he wrote an article back in 2010 that pointed out that the Greek word that's translated in is translated upper room in the story about where Jesus instructs the disciples to prepare the Passover meal, which becomes the place where Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper as a sacrament. It's not translated in. On the other hand, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Good Samaritan picks up the wounded traveler and takes him to an inn to recuperate, it's not the same word. And so, what Dr. Carlson argues is that the word should probably properly be translated guest room. And then he goes into a little bit of description about how homes were built and maintained in the first century in Judea and in Galilee. He says that most people built homes on two levels. They were kind of split level houses. The livestock were kept in the lower level, and then people lived on the upper level, which kind of made sense because the livestock would the heat would rise, and that would keep the upstairs a little bit warmer in the winter months. And when new families were started, they would often build a guest room on as an attachment to the split level home where the young couple would start out until they had sufficient wherewithal to establish their own domicile elsewhere in the village or the town. And so, what he suggests is that Joseph was engaged to Mary, that it was an engagement arranged for by his parents and her parents. He went to Galilee to get her, brought her back to Bethlehem, where his extended family lived, and they took up residence in a guest room. And the time came for Mary to give birth to her child, but there was no room for them in the guest room. They had to have a midwife. They had to boil water, right? I don't know what boiling water is for when you give birth to a child. Isn't that what you always do when before there were hospitals for people to give birth in? Anyway, there was no room for them to have a midwife and boiling water, so they came down where the livestock were, and that's where she gave birth, and then she laid him in a manger. So this is kind of like that episode of Mythbusters, right? Or an episode of Mythbusters. No inn, no grumpy innkeeper who won't put up the couple for the night. Um, but maybe a family and close relatives who, uh, you know, invited Mary and Joseph down into the larger living room space for her to give birth to the child. Now, that's a whole lot to bring up in one sermon. I'm already at the 4:52 minute of this video, so thank you for sticking with me for this long. And I just kind of, again, that was on the cutting room floor. But wanted to share that with you and ask you, what do you think? Does that ruin Christmas for you if you know that they actually did have a place to stay and they just shifted from one room to the other? Or does that not ruin Christmas for you? Let me know. You can email me at mlindsay@haddonfieldpres.org or give me a call on my cell phone. Um, well, I'm not going to publish that here, but you can call the church office and get in touch with me that way. 856-429-1960. And let me know, is Christmas better or worse with or without an N? Um, that's Marvin's from the cutting room floor for the week after Christmas. Take care. God bless.